Touchdown Tampa Bay, you're listening to the Pewtercast.
Welcome back to the Pewtercast. This is the second half of our Final Thoughts episode, wrapping up the 2018 season. If you guys missed the first part of this show, we got to talk with Rock Riley of sportstalkflorida.com and really just a legend among Tampa Bay sports market. That one was fantastic. If you missed it, head back one podcast in the feed. You guys will find that there. However, we are turning our attention in this one really to talking about our final thoughts on the season. We're going to be doing that in a couple of different ways, but I'm not going to be doing it myself. As always, my co-host Ren Daxt is joining with me tonight. Ren, how are we doing tonight, buddy?
Good, man. What's up?
Man, I've had a day. I've had a day, and kids are driving me crazy. But hey, that's. I
feel like you've had a lot of days lately.
I've had a lot of days. This season, the holiday season has been trying, to say the least. So I'm I'm ready. You know what it is we're not in the like normal groove and rhythm, I think, of our weeks, and everything's all messed up. So we're getting back into that later half of this week and through next week. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But it's just a season of life, I think. So, but anyway,
the season of life.
It's just a season of life.
Jesus.
But anyway, we are here. Like we said, we're going to talk about the 2018 season. And Ren, there's so much really from the season as a whole that we could be talking about. But I mean, we'd be here for
the football season or the season of life.
The football season.
Checking.
For which I'm glad this particular season is over, so I can focus on this other season.
You should have seen the look Brent gave me when I said that. Not happy with that joke. I guess it's a joke. Observation. Yeah. Observational humor.
Observational. Yeah. We'll see if it gets edited out. No, it won't. All right. Because that requires work. All right. What are we doing? We're talking about the 2018 season, but there's so much to the whole season that we could sit here and talk for hours, just kind of taking a stroll down memory lane. And you know, for as crappy as the season turned out, Ren, 5-11, definitely not the way we wanted it to go. Yet again, in many ways, kind of feels like a repeat of last year. But we're not going to do it that way. If you guys were with the Pewtercast a long time ago, we used to have a segment where we would do top three. We had like a top three list, like every week, a brand new top three list. And we kind of stopped doing that because it was tedious and weird and whatever. But
it started becoming harder than it needed to be.
Yeah, it really did.
What are we going to like? We're just like making ourselves talk about stuff.
Exactly. So we did away with that on the show, but we're going to bring that back and we're going to use that to kind of couch this conversation. And we're going to bring up our top three moments of the 2018 season, or top three things that define the season, or top three memory, or whatever that is. And these could be good, these could be bad, they could be whatever, but you know, that's how we're going to do this. So Ren, you've got your three, I've got my three, and we might even have a few honorable mentions at the end. But so that's what we're going to do here. And then after this, we're going to talk about our grades. And the way we're going to grade out the season is, you know, it would be easy just to kind of sit back and be like, oh, they sucked and they couldn't get anything done, and so everybody fails, right? That'd be really easy. But we're really going to try to actually have a conversation about how the team, the individual units performed over the course of this past season. So that's kind of what we'll be looking at. Then we'll be talking about your emails. We've got some emails from lots of our listeners out there, and we'll dive into those. So Ren, why don't we go ahead and get started with our top three moments of the 2018 season? So I will put it to you as you're thinking about your list. Were there any specific criterias that you were using as you're kind of picking these moments over the course of the last several months.
I forgot about that criteria part. That used to catch me every week. All right, you got your 3. I do, and then you said, "What were your criteria?" I'm like, well, what was the subject? Like, what's the subject of the top 3? That was my criteria. Like it's in the. My criteria was, Brent, the top 3 things, the top 3 stories of the Buccaneers season.
Okay. All right. So you say the top 3 stories. So it's not necessarily individual moments, or it's not necessarily
that moment would be a story.
Right. But it's not like maybe a personal experience or anything like that. You're talking about kind of the big headlines and stuff. Okay. Why don't you go with us? Hit us up. Now, Art, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Because I will go through mine 1, 2, 3, or 3, 2, 1, but I'm not ranking them. There is no specific order for me. Like, I'm just going to give you 3. Are you going to rank these like in an order of importance or order of memory making or whatever for you, or
memorandum? No. There was one that I think was had the most to do with the season, as in, if you had to write a paragraph on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2018 football season, like, this would be like the first sentence.
It was you getting credentials to training camp.
Yes. That's not it. But the other two, like, they're totally different. Like, one's kind of like a negative and one's like a real positive. So I don't want to really rank one ahead of the other, because one is another thing that happened that probably in my mind is the second most thing that shaped this season, and the third one is just something I want to bring light to.
Okay.
So it's real hard to put one of those last 2 over another, because it's apples and oranges basically.
Sure. All right, man. Well, hit us up first. What do you have is your first moment from the 2018 season?
The Jameis Winston suspension.
Yeah.
I think that totally right off from the beginning, right from training camp, right from the first game we had, the second game we had, the third game we had, the fourth game we had, the fifth game we had, and the Cincinnati game. Like all of this came from the Jameis Winston suspension.
Sure.
The monster that Fitzpatrick, when he became Fitzmagic, Jameis made him. He made that because of not being available for the first 3 games. Having such a, because Jameis, like, we forget how good Jameis looked in the preseason. Jameis had a Jameis had a good preseason. Like, our 3 quarterbacks the preseason were like all in the top 10 of all the preseason categories. Like, Fitzpatrick was, Jameis was, Ryan Griffin was, but Jameis had the best of the 3. Like, it's hard for Ryan Griffin because he was playing, mostly with the 3s and less, but he had against his competition did really well. Fitzpatrick had one game where he was kind of like, but Jameis, every time he hit the field, man, he was just he lit it up and lit it on fire. And the Bucs offense, they're identifying the one-on-ones and they were going after you deep, and they were connecting like time after time after time. You're like, whoa, and that's when we started talking about the running game. It was like, okay, passing game looks good. What about this running game that's not happening? What about Ronald Jones? But
which never really materialized anywhere over the season.
But I shouldn't have said that because I don't really want to. That's not one of my top 3. But and then we fast forward to the Saints game where, honestly, that was the game that Ryan Fitzpatrick looked the best. You could say that he won that game for the Buccaneers. It certainly wasn't defense, winning 48-40 on the road in the Superdome. Ran for that last first down where it looked like, hey, if they don't get a first down here, Drewe's going to get the ball back, and hey, he's probably going to score because he's already scored 40.
Right.
So, he sort of put the game on his back or legs, so to speak, and picked up that last first down. We're able to run out the clock. And then we had the Philly game where the first play of the game, as everyone remembers, is that deep touchdown pass to Deshaun Jackson. Rolled out, led to the middle of the field. Deshaun Jackson ran under it, made a little cutback in the end zone. He goes. But after that, Fitzpatrick was, he kind of turned back into Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
Only put 20 more points up the rest of that game. Which but that doesn't sound like a lot. Well, if you just take the first play out of it, it's basically the whole game. Like he had a whole nother game, and Atlanta put up 20 points. And we know what happened to the Steelers, where he threw 3 interceptions in a row on 3 consecutive plays, and then had that come back in the second half. Didn't put up any points the first half, put up 27, and then the Chicago game happened.
Yeah.
And no, that's not true. There was a game before that. No,
you're
that was
right.
Yeah. Then the Chicago game happened, and we're like, oh, huh, like that's not good.
Right.
And then Jameis comes back, and he's even admit that he was pushing. And we had Rick Stroud on. And he told us that he felt that Jameis said, "Okay, I see the weapons. I see what you've done. Now watch this. Like I'm the starter. Watch what I put up."
Right.
And he pushed too much, and the turnovers started to pile up. Then he had that meltdown in the Cincinnati game, which brought Fitzpatrick back in again.
Yep.
Because Fitzpatrick came in the second half against a terrible defense and almost brought us back to win. And then we have the 500-yard game, 3 points against the Redskins. Then we have the Giants game where Fitzpatrick melts down again.
Right.
And they bring Jameis in, and he almost brings us back.
Right.
And now after all this happened, after the Giants game, it's like, okay, now we're ready to play.
Right.
Now, here we go. Here's the season.
It's like, so we didn't really get to our season until like week 10.
Yeah. It's like, okay, now we've got all this all figured out finally. Here we go. And, so all of that started because of 3-game suspension. Yeah. And it just,
pretty sure we went 1-6 in those last few games too, which just, geez.
No, we won 2 in a row. We went 2 and.
Oh, did we? Okay.
5.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it all in my mind. We only won 5 over the whole season. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's.
Well, yeah, we took off like a rocket ship, and then we were like a ship stuck in a hurricane, spinning about and not knowing what direction we're going, and that never really got straightened out till, like I said, around the Giants game. And then it was like, okay, but now by then it's like, well, the season's over. Like, let's face it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we can rattle off these last 8, 7, 6 games and make the playoffs because we've shown the ability, to not turn the ball over and stop the opponent.
Okay, I got a question for you. So we get to the mid-season point. It's game 9. And I think at this point we're 3-5.
Okay.
I think is where we were. Was in realistically, in order to get to the playoffs, we needed to win 6 of our last 8. Really probably needed to win 7. Would have been great to win all 8. Was there a small part of you that thought they might pick up 6, 7, or 8 wins down the stretch of the season?
There always is, because our offense, we had seen our offense, how good they were.
Yeah.
And then looking forward in the schedule, it's like Carolina was tanking.
Right.
Not tanking as they're doing on purpose, but they'd fallen off a cliff. Like they were 6-2 and lost. By the time we got them, we lost 5, 6 in a row. We were facing we had the 49ers coming into town with the 3rd string quarterback. Yeah. And by the time they got to us, they didn't have any receivers that day. We
had Washington that couldn't do anything and was signing people off the street that week.
Yeah. When we decided to lose that game, that was fun.
Right.
Then we had the Ravens, whose defense were good, but they weren't putting up a lot of points.
Right.
Like Koetter said, hey, if we put up 20, we win, and he was right. If we would have, and there wasn't a defense that you look at week in and week out that said like they stopped us. It was the same stuff we always do. We led the league in turnovers. You know that, right?
Oh yeah.
So if we ended up being 12th in points scored, 1st in yards per game, 1st in passing yards per game, pretty low down in rushing, shocker. But if you're 12th and you're turning the ball over most, if you just you don't even have to say, oh, just cut that in half and sort of be, somewhere in the top 10 or top half of the league of not turning the ball over. Just take 8 of those away, 9 of them away. How does that affect your scoring per game? I mean, because those are drives that, you can continue.
Right. Right.
So I wasn't really I was a little bit afraid of what Lamar Jackson could do. I didn't think he could throw the ball at all. At least as far as, as an NFL caliber quarterback. We saw that in that game. But, the defense just could not stop them.
Yeah.
Running, they just couldn't do it. And a lot of teams haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Dallas, who I think, which Dallas team is going to show up,
Yeah.
They lived and died by their defense again. I think we handled them, and we did. It was one of those games where it's, oh, okay. I think it was another costly turnover game, wasn't it? Yeah, Dallas wasn't the Dallas one where they returned 2 fumbles, or was that?
It's all a blur, honestly, right now. I'm having trouble remembering what happened in exactly which game, but yeah, I thought we were going to be Dallas. I'll be honest with you, I really did.
I thought we could have gone. I 6-2 is what I was looking at.
Yeah,
I'm like 6-2. That's really doable.
It wasn't unreasonable.
Yeah, but what we have to do is quit turning the ball over, and play some defense.
Right.
And we played a little bit of defense, and then by the time we decided to stop turning the ball over, unfortunately, that also meant we stopped scoring as much.
We did.
But then as Jameis sort of grew into this, hey, trying to find the sweet spot in between being aggressive, not turning the ball over, and hey, pick up the first down and continue the drive. I think once we saw that sort of get better game after game after game after game. When he first came back, he was kind of a game manager. Mm-hmm. But by the end of the season against the Falcons, it's okay, that was almost like the perfect mix. And then he had something like the game before that, it was 13 check downs, and Koetter was it's the most efficient Jameis has ever played. So, but I remember thinking that last year after he got injured, and when he came back, he played really good ball. The turnovers were still there every once in a while, but so yeah, would I have bet my house the Bucs were going to go 6-2 in the second half of the season? Absolutely not.
Right.
Would I bet somebody at the bar $20? 10 for sure. Mm-hmm. Maybe not 20.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I get it, man. I get it. The Jameis suspension certainly it certainly molded the season. For sure. For my first moment from the season, I'm going to give something that actually you just talked about just a little bit there, and it's going to sum up in one word. And I think this certainly was a storyline. It was hype. It was a fun part of the season for when it was, and cursed us a little bit for the rest of the season. But Fitzmagic, when
that's your number one.
Man, I told you I'm not ranking these. I'm just throwing them out there.
Top 3. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But it's Fitzmagic. This is, I think, one of the things that I will probably remember most about this season. Seeing Ryan Fitzpatrick up there wearing Deshaun Jackson's clothes, saying, "We just got to stay humble. We got to stay humble." And it's almost like they didn't really stay humble at all after that moment. But, he became the first player in NFL history to throw 400-plus yards in 3 consecutive games. You mentioned that deep pass from Fitz to Deshaun in the Eagles game, where it was the first play of the game, and Deshaun went to the house. That Saints game, which I just read somewhere earlier today, maybe I saw a tweet or something, that game was considered one of the top 3 games in the league this past season or something like that. The
opening Saints game, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yes, definitely the opening one. But then you remember the craze that came around that as well. People started printing up T-shirts, and people were wearing fake beards. Some people were wearing real beards, I guess. But you remember watching. They kept showing Evan Smith and Fitzpatrick doing this beard rub, which was just weird and awkward and off-putting. Yeah. And then the guys at Good Morning Football were kind of getting in on the whole thing. And then there was this weird, very weird thing about Minkah Fitzpatrick trademarking the name Fitzmagic. It was what in the world? So,
did you see that just came down that they They refused that.
Oh, did they?
Like just within an hour since we started. Yeah. They said because it would be too closely related to Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he tried to trademark Fitzmagic, and they're like, nope, that's actually Ryan Fitzpatrick's. We can't give it to you.
Right.
Even though Ryan Fitzpatrick hasn't trademarked it.
That's funny. Because, I mean, certainly I would think Ryan Fitzpatrick, but I got to imagine a lot of people with the name Fitzpatrick get Fitzmagic. Some people, I don't know. I honestly, I can't think of too many people that I know that have that name. So, but whatever.
Wait. Disregard everything I just.
Yeah, but either way, that whole Fitzmagic thing, and I think you explained kind of real beautifully, Ren, where it came from Jameis's own doing in a lot of ways, and yeah, so that's kind of my first moment from the season that really jumps out to me that I will certainly remember 2018 for. All right, man, moment number 2, what you got?
Well, actually, I just want to comment on what you said. Yeah, I mean, that's true, because if you go, hey, break down the season, you start from game 1.
Yeah.
You go, okay, game 1, you go, oh, yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick. And, so I can see where, that I don't think it molded the season as much as suspension, but, it was the biggest part of the season as just about anything else can be. Mm-hmm. The good, the bad, and especially the ramifications of what he did. It was just we almost, I almost feel like we might have had a better season if he went like 1-2 or 0-3. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just might have had a better season.
I mean, and Ren, I know we don't like to play the alternate timeline here. And by the way, I love that that's kind of something that you sort of came up with, and I like not playing that game a whole lot. But
it's very easy to go, I don't do that.
Yeah.
But what about, no, can't do that. Yeah. Can't change time.
No, you can't. But I mean, you just kind of did. Like, what if he'd went 1-2? What if this whole Jameis suspension never happened? And Jameis would have taken all of those number 1 reps in training camp and then been here for the 16 games, assuming he doesn't get injured. It really does. And Jameis's face was up on the side of the stadium and he wasn't removed from marketing. And there was this, a lot of people have said that Jameis sort of feels like he got neutered a little bit in the last half of the season.
A lot of people, as in Mark Cook.
Was it Mark? Maybe. Yeah, I don't. It's something I know I've heard for sure. He
was the loudest person that I heard when he came back. From being benched the second time, about how he's a game manager and complaining. Oh, you've coached the aggressiveness right out of him and all that other bull malarkey. But I'm sorry, you were saying
right. But no, the idea of like if maybe some of that hadn't happened, just if the suspension hadn't happened, what could have also been, I think is my main thought there. So anyway, your second moment or memory or season shaping thing.
I guess you would say the non-firing of Mike Smith during the off season. Just how bad his defense was. Yeah. The first 5 weeks. And, all the excuses we gave him his first year was here. Mm-hmm. Well, you got to wait 5 games before they gel. Then we waited 5 games. Then we waited 8 games. Then we waited 9 games. And then the Bucs went on a big turnover streak on defense. Mm-hmm. And they won 5 in a row. We're like, okay, I get it now. Here we go. And then the debacle that was last year, where the defense couldn't hold a lead, couldn't, it's got to be real hard to play quarterback where that in the back of your mind, you think, if I don't score here, when I come back on the field, I'm going to be losing. Yeah. And then if I don't score that time, I come back on the field, I'll be losing by more. Mm-hmm. So, it's one thing to trust your defense, but it's also one thing to foolishly trust your defense. Like I'm going to take this check down. We're probably not going to get the first down, but that's okay my defense is going to hold them, and I'll just be able to kind of start from scratch in a series. It didn't happen. Didn't happen for, I don't know, he had 5 games, so what, the last 21 games as he was the DC.
Mm-hmm.
So given the improvement, which by the way, what isn't as I did the legwork on this. It's not as great as Mark Duffner's presence, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Even though from where it was to where it finished at, points per game they were giving up,
mm-hmm.
it's still in the bottom half of the league. Just his game, like just the games that Mark Duffner coached.
Mm-hmm.
You take that and average it out. So, just the stubbornness of Dirk Koetter not to fire Mike Smith during the off season, and then we start playing this. What could have been?
Sure.
If they had a DC coordinator come in here, or maybe even fire him a week early and give a Duffner the bye week to try to prepare for the Atlanta game and see what happens then. But just Mike Smith and that historically bad defense, because before he got fired,
mm-hmm.
The Buccaneers were on pace to be the worst defense ever in the National Football League. If using statistic, giving the most points up, and that's the main one. You know
what's funny to me? I'm sorry. Using the statistic of worst defense ever by giving points away, yet so often when people talk about the best offense in the league or the most prolific offense in the league, we don't talk about points being put on the board. We talk about yards.
Yeah, I talk about points. I don't talk about yards. I mean, it's nice to rank them and kind of see, because what you would like to see is that yards and points sort of are within like 2 or 3 of each other,
Yeah.
If you're like first in yards, then you should be somewhere in the top 5 in points for it to make it to work.
Mm-hmm.
Or because, there's anomalies out there that, maybe your defense gets the ball, leads the league in turnovers. So you have more short fields than anybody else by 10 or 15 times,
Mm-hmm.
you have 37 short field drives and everyone else only had like 16. And so those yards don't show up, but look at all the points we're scoring. So,
mm-hmm.
Or it could be vice versa, which is a lot of things the Bucs do. They, they'll drive the ball from the 20-yard line all the way down to the 5,
mm-hmm.
and then get a penalty, throw an incomplete pass, and miss the field goal. So you like to see those things match up. I think they're both things you should track when judging an offense and or defense, but for you can't take one without the other and throw away the other one if it's bad, if you're trying to make a point. Well, look at the Bucs. Look at that, because we average the most yards per game in the NFL. Mm-hmm. We did. But we're 12th in points scored. And that's too much of a disparity. Yeah. The turnovers are a thing, are a part of it. Stalling in the red zone are a part of it. So it is funny how people do that. How they just go, hey, we're number 1 offense. For what? Like converting third downs?
Right. Right.
Which is a good stat to have, but what's your record? How many points are you putting up?
Mm-hmm. So then I think it's also safe to say that a big moment from the season is the actual firing of Mike Smith.
Yeah.
And because it did change things.
Yeah.
Did it? Oh, I mean, no, it's actually a good question. Like, did it really change much firing Mike Smith? I mean, you said go ahead.
Yeah. The only thing it changed was it made the defense look competitive, and that it gave the offense to actually have a chance to win games. But once again, if you take, because we're going to talk about this later when we do the final grades.
Mm-hmm.
This is sort of I'm going to go through when I grade the defense. Even though it's a vast improvement as far as points wise, mm-hmm. but it was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
it's still below mediocrity what Duffner put out there.
Yeah.
Or the Buccaneers defense put out there,
Yeah.
So did it change a lot?
Well, and I mean, to that point, Buckner told us and Koetter told us and everybody, listen, it's still the same system. It's still the same guys. It's still the same, X, Y, Z. It just, I mean, obviously there were some differences that had to happen. That just comes with a different person calling the plays and feel for the game or whatever. But it just looked like a better version of the same old defense, though. And the defense was at least the secondary man was beat up all year long.
That's true. He had He had less players to work with. I don't know if I would use the word better. I would like to use least incompetent, because Mike's defense. Remember when we go on the pod and we're watching it's an away game. We're watching on TV, and the receiver would catch the ball, and there's no one else on the screen.
Yeah,
that happened game after game, drive after drive. It was they had no idea what they were doing out there.
Or you'd see them lining up and everybody's pointing to each other saying, no, you go there, move here. And Brent Grimes is over there going, I don't know what the hell we're doing, guys.
Yeah. And as they're looking
I'll stand up by this guy right here.
Yeah. And as they're looking at each other and pointing, the ball's already been hiked by a half second.
You're right.
And half the defense isn't even they're looking at each other. They're not looking at it was a goddamn mess. Right.
And it did seem that under Duffner, we got away from that.
It did.
So, and that was all the reports that we heard. It was a simplification of the defense. So, all right. Well, with that, I think for my second thing, I'm going to stick with the defense and that side of the ball. And by the way, I don't think I gave my criteria. Yours is more of this storylines, things that shape the season. Mine is more things that jump out to me. As I remember the season, the things that really are highlighted throughout the season. And so for mine, it is JPP becoming the first player since Simeon Rice to finally crack 10 sacks. It was such a big moment. Even in the stadium when that happened, they had they didn't stop the game, but they waited for a game break and then made this big announcement. And they had this big thing play up on the video board, and it's oh my God, 10 sacks. We just the first player in 12 years to crack 10 sacks. And, it seems as podcasters, this is something we keep talking about for the last couple of years is when are we going to crack 10 sacks? And, 10 sacks, 10 sacks, 10 sacks. And it's this big, sexy number. But still, the fact that it finally happened, it's I don't want to call it was a curse or anything like that, but it's we got that monkey off our backs a little bit. And, JPP, man, had a hell of a year. Carl Nassib had a hell of a year coming in here, especially compared to some of the stuff we've seen in recent years out of our defensive ends. But that's what I'm going with for my second thing that really stands out to me from this season, JPP cracking the 10 sack mark.
Yeah, I felt that just kind of went by in a whisper, But I felt somewhere around game 5, 6, maybe 7, we knew it was going to happen because the pace JPP was going on.
Sure.
But, I've said my views on the pod about this, why I think that it wasn't such a big hubbub is because as fans, we're thinking if someone gets 10 sacks, so that means the pass rush has got to be a lot better. And if the pass rush is a lot better, that means the defense is a lot better. If the defense is a lot better, then we're winning more games. And the only thing that really happened was the pass rush got a lot better. Mm-hmm. Everything else that you figured would follow in line and get the all ducks a row, none of that was happening. So even though, we were yes, 10 sacks, but we all thought 10 sacks would equate to more wins and probably, at least in my mind, if somebody gets 10 sacks, well, then we're going to the playoffs.
Right.
But it just wasn't happening. It wasn't going to happen. By the time he got it, everyone knew it wasn't going to happen. So it was just kind of okay, yeah, okay, that's something we don't have to talk about now for, maybe 5 years. Mm-hmm. I'm saying if the Bucks go without a 10-sack leader for another 5 years, then we can start talking about it again. It was just, I don't know, it was just something that was kind of like uniquely ours. And then when it went away, it was like, oh, okay. You get to the prize and it's like, early bird gets the worm. Okay, great. What am I going to do with the worm? Like,
right.
Wow, thanks. Glad I got a bet for that. Big incentive. So for me, it was this. It was.
Was it anticlimactic?
Super anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Super anticlimactic. Because all the things that I'd built up in my head, obviously wrongfully so, that were going to go along with this.
Right.
Not even close.
Right.
Not even close.
Right. So
number 3 for me.
Yeah, man.
Goes along those lines. What you're talking about with JPP is Mike Evans.
Mm-hmm.
One of those rare draft picks that not only hasn't disappointed, has exceeded expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's not forget that, early in Mike Evans' career, even though he was some early years, he was putting up 13 touchdowns, making a lot of catches, putting up big yards. He had the dropsies.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, he used to have an attitude problem.
Mm-hmm.
He used to complain to the officials every time a ball was thrown his way and he didn't catch it. He was all in the officials' faces. I was held. I was robbed. What's going on? Where's my flag? And pretty much since Koetter became head coach, all that has gone away, and he's steadily improved. I think his play. His numbers might not show that year in, year out, but this year it did. I mean, he broke the franchise record for most reception yards in a season.
Mm-hmm.
Got over 1,500 yards. Youngest player to hit 6,000 yards in a season.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and obviously he got his 1,000 yards this year. If he gets 1,000 yards next year, I think he holds the record all by himself.
That's right.
For 1,000 yards, like most consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to begin a career.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike Evans is a rare exception to Buccaneer fandom, or at least Buccaneer drafts that that has overachieves his expectations, even though he was a first rounder, and was he the 13th overall pick, or am I just thinking that because
no, he was the 7th overall pick.
7th overall pick
in 2013,
and he's number 13.
There you go.
13 backwards is B.
Yes, it is.
The letter. Just letting you guys know. So that's my third one. I think Mike Evans, it was sort of glossed over because it was, last game of the year. And before he sort of got his accolades from the fans and Twitter and the podcast and all that stuff, Koetter was fired. I mean, like no one even put out a podcast before Koetter. I think Peter Nation got a podcast out before Koetter was fired.
They did.
So wrapping up the season, I don't feel Mike has sort of got his accolades. So I would like to make that my number 3 because he has not disappointed whatsoever as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the thing that I think I'll remember about Mike Evans the most this season, at least that jumps out to me, is hey, he already hit 1,000 yards and it's only like game 11 and we got games more to go. Like, how did he rack up that many yards so fast? Like, it was such a quiet, never seemed like he made didn't seem like he got a whole lot of catches this year. He could maybe like 3, 4, 5 a game, maybe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he would get around, about somewhere from 5 to 7.
Right.
The reason it wasn't a Mike Evans year that we're used to seeing. Like, first off, his yak, I haven't looked it up, but I'm sure it was easily the most he's ever had.
Yeah.
Yards after catch. I mean, he broke a couple, and, he said 2 years ago something he's worked on. Was trying to work on, didn't really do it last year at all. And then this year he started to sort of see the fruits of his labor. And that's probably the main reason why he broke the single season record as a Buccaneer receiver, gone over 1,500 yards. and why it was so quiet, because the Mike Evans the seasons we're kind of used to seeing is the most targets in the league.
Right.
Games where he catches like 10 balls, 11 balls, has games where, he goes for 130, 140 yards, like 2 or 3 of those a year.
Right.
And that's kind of how Mike would rack up his yards was basically, we're going to throw the ball at you 18 times this game, and you're going to catch 11 of them.
Right.
But this year it was like, we're going to throw at you 9 times, and you're going to catch anywhere from 5 to 9. But with his yak this year, but he was much more steady, because there was times during those high target and years where he would run into somebody and he would kind of get shut down.
Right.
And he'd get 2 catches for 28 yards, and people were like, uh-oh, like what happened? And of course we got blown out that game because we didn't have really we didn't really have a lot of other weapons to go to during those years. That was the Cam Brate 8 catches, 80 yards, 2 touchdown games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then, just Mike Evans, man. It was cool though. He broke. All right. Run me through one more time. What are because he broke as far as his records, there's the youngest player to 6,000. He also got 1,000 yards in each of his first 5 seasons. Right. And he's in a group of only 3 people to do that. And then he also became the Buccaneers.
I think one of them, he might have to do it 2 more years. One of them drops off this year.
Yeah.
I think the only people left were like him, AJ Green, and Randy Moss. And I think AJ Green drops off. Like this was like his 5th year was his last 1,000 yard consecutive 1,000 yards. So I think next year it's just him and Moss. And if he does it next year, he ties Moss. And if he does it the year after that, which would be 2020, then he'll have the record all by himself.
He also now holds the Buccaneer franchise record for most receptions in a season. Most receiving yards. I think it's those 2 as well. Like he holds like a couple of franchise records as well now. So it's he had a. Did
he get the most? Did he get the most receiving yards?
Yeah, he beat what was that guy's name from like '88 or something like that?
No, Mark Carrier. But I mean ever.
Like in the NFL or for the franchise?
For the franchise.
I'm pretty sure.
NFL,
pretty sure it's for the franchise.
All right, I'm going to look it up.
All right, you do that.
I'm going to look it up while you give your third.
My third. All right. Oh man, there's so many. There's so many little moments. I'm going to go with this one simply because it seemed like such a big thing, and I'm probably making a bigger deal out of it than I need to, and you're probably going to laugh at me, and I don't care. It's still going to be my third one. But it is collectively every Cairo Santos kick except for the ones that he missed this season.
Are you just trying to be creative with these? Is that what's going on?
No, not at all. Think about it, okay? You got to go back to like, for me, it's Kyle Brinza from a couple years ago. Like we have just never really settled in on a kicker. We had Pat Murray last year, who he kind of came in and settled some stuff down, but still that was You had the Aguayo thing, you had the Nick Folk thing, and then what was the name of the guy at the beginning of this year? Catanzaro. We had Catanzaro, and it has been so. We've gotten so used to in Tampa Bay, just bad kicking, and you'd sit there and you'd watch the kicks and you'd cringe as they go up. But then with Cairo Santos, man, you'd watch him, and not only would he kick them, he would kick them right down the middle, except for the ones that he missed, which he only missed what, like 2 or 3, I think. And I might be minimizing it, but it just and it got to the point where I would still sit back and watch those kicks, but just because they went right down the middle, like you could put an arrow right in the side, and that just seemed like right where he was hitting them. So to me, it's not just the kicks; it's really getting in this guy like Cairo Santos. I don't know if they're going to bring back Cairo Santos for next year. He's not under contract after this year. So we'll see what they do. They'll probably mess around and try to bring in some other kicker. He doesn't have the most powerful leg, especially when it comes to kickoffs. Yeah, so that's what I'm going with. Cairo Santos, his every kicks except for the ones that he missed.
Okay.
All right, Ren, well, why don't we go ahead and transition over to the grades as we grade out the season. So this is really kind of a part where we're going to try to take an objective look and actually figure out how this team did, even though the end result wasn't necessarily what we wanted. So, Ren, I'll put it to you. How do you grade out the various units on this team, offense, defense, special teams, and then the team as a whole for the 2018 season?
Well, I went by the most important stat besides wins and losses. I went by points scored and points given up. But then I took in turnovers into account. I guess the database I was using didn't break it down as far as I could find. I didn't dig too deep about penalties and how penalties sort of factor into that. But we'll start with the offense. Buccaneers offense came in 12th, just outside of the top 10. And then you think about that, you're like, well, that's an A minus, B plus, almost the top third of the league, and then you factor in the turnovers, and you're like we talked about earlier, and said, well, hey, if you could just bring those down just a little bit, that extends these drives, and they could have been higher. For me, from what the defense was putting up on the field and the pressure was putting on the quarterbacks to have to take these chances to score, obviously the quarterbacks didn't handle the situation well and turned the ball over a lot. I think being 12th in points scored and being in the top 10 for most of the year, I think I'm giving the offense a B minus. Even though, I sitting here like to blame the defense for some of the turnovers because the pressure they're putting on, they didn't make them fumble the ball. They didn't make them throw the interceptions. Not that they chose to, but they did. So that's why I'm going with a B minus for the offense.
All right. You want to bounce back and forth, or you want to go through your whole list?
I guess I'll go through my whole list. The defense. All right, here's what I found. Mike Smith, in his 5 games, he was giving up 34.6 points a game. Okay? Then the 11 games that Duffner took over, averaged it out, it improved to 26.5, which is, a big improvement. That's how many points is that? Sorry. It's over a touchdown a game. That's huge. But like I said before, since the bar was so low, 26.5 placed us in 26th if you averaged it out. If you took the 11-game average, threw it in there with the other 16 other teams that played 16 games, a little bit unfair, but this is what we got to work with. They would have been 26th in the league. The only defense that were worse were the Cards, the Dolphins, the 49ers, the Jets, the Bengals, and the Raiders. So, as we were going through the season, we were talking about this market improvement by the defense. It still falls short of even mediocrity. Mediocrity, what do we always like to say? Somewhere in between like 14 to 18 maybe 17, like 14, 15, 16, 17. Like right in there. 26th. So
it's pretty low.
The defense, it's pretty low, and shockingly, it's pretty low for over a touchdown a game improvement. I mean, that just kind of lets you know how bad the defense was. So then you coupled in. Actually, the defense didn't finish too badly in turnovers at the as an overall. But when they were going through that losing streak, and we had like 7 games without a turnover, even a fumble, even a sack strip fumble, nothing. They couldn't get anything. Throw that all in there together. I got to give the defense. I got to give them an F. Like I just feel like that's where it's at. I mean, you went from historically bad to 26 bad, and if you put them all together, like if you include Mike Smith and Duffner's, put them all together, the only team we're worse than is or better than in points per game given up is the Raiders. So we ended up 31st.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's an F.
Right.
That's an F. You know, with that huge streak, the lack of turnovers, it was just bad.
Because there were games under Duffner and under Mike Smith. I'm thinking specifically of the Pittsburgh game and then of the Falcons game, where you get that tale of two halves for the defense itself. You know, they as Ian Beckles likes to put it, they give up the booty in one half, be it the first or second, and then they come damn near close to shutting them out, or they do shut them out in the second half. Like that's in the same game. Like we saw that. You know, those are just the two that jump to my mind. But
right.
You know, one's the beginning of the year, one's the end of the year. Like it just those are the games that baffle me. How you go in and give up 30 some odd points in one half and then shut them out in a second, or shut them out in the first half and then give up 34 points in the second half. Like it blows my mind. Anyway,
there were too many games this year that once the team started scoring, they didn't stop.
Couldn't stop. Yeah.
You know, we can look at the Falcons game, just the last game of the season. You know, it took the Falcons like 3 or 4 series to sort of figure it out, and then the only time the Bucs defense stopped them from scoring is when Matt Ryan threw an interception. The Panthers game, it was 35-0 at half, or not nothing, but 30. They scored 35 points for halftime. 35 at halftime. That's, you know, the way I look at it is, if you score 17 points in a half, your offense, the most you should be down is by 4, or your defense is playing terrible. You know, I like give up 21 points in the first half. Not great, but it's not going to lose you the football game if your offense has put some points up. But there was just too many times this year that the game was over by halftime.
Yeah.
And so that's why they get it out. Now, the special team's a little trickier. Yards given up on kickoff returns and punt returns, like, we were pretty good. Like, we were one of the best teams in the league as far as holding teams kicks that they'd kickoffs that they did return, hold them to yardage, middle of the pack on punt returns, like average and yards given up and how many times they actually did return it and things like that. But, you know, let's face it, the problem was the kick, the field goal kicking. You know, we know that was the problem. You can playing the what if game in the alter timeline game. You can pick over the past 2 years numerous games that you could fault the field goal kicker being the biggest reason why we lost the game. So even though some of these stats did surprise me as far as like return yards and how the Bucs did, it's just, you know, the clutch kicks that were missed. I mean, how many times do you feel like we were chasing points this year? Like Catanzaro would miss the first extra point like over and over. So we'd be down 7-6, so we could never get that point back.
Right. Well, I mean, something we said on this show quite a bit, especially through that first part of the season, when we talk about why the offense was so prolific as far as yards gained and why we had to keep getting all these yards and why we're passing so much. And, you know, why we're passing deep and why, you know, why all this is because we were chasing points. Like, that's why.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the reason we gave for that throughout so much of the season, particularly the first half of the season. So, you know, the idea that it's just, you put us behind the 8 ball. And a lot of times it was because of special teams, because of Catanzaro, specifically him. Or we'd go offense go down, score a touchdown, then miss the extra point, right? Miss that kick, and then we're chasing that one extra point. You know, all of a sudden it changes what we do later, and maybe we go for a 2 that we don't get, or we go for, it's just crazy.
Yeah, so I'm giving, even though as bad as the field goal kicking was, it is only a small part of special teams. And we didn't really do that bad on punt averages and kickoffs, the amount of touchbacks and the amount of yards given up. So I'm giving them a D minus.
Okay.
The special teams, which really shouldn't be a shock because I don't think, and I've said it many times in the pod, that Koetter really doesn't really care about special teams. Like, he doesn't put an emphasis on to have good special teams.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, Adam Humphries, catch the ball and let my offense get out there.
Right.
Not nearly aggressive enough, in my opinion. But
right.
So there we got it. We got a B minus, an F, and a D minus. And if you add that all up, it equals 5 wins.
There you go. Which is just enough to get you sitting home during the playoffs.
Just enough to get you fired.
Right. Twice in a row. All right. Well, I'm actually really similar to you, Ren, on my grades for the season. For the offense, I'm giving them a B+. And I didn't go into the numbers and stuff that you went into. I was really just kind of based on my memory of the season and trying to take the whole season into account. This was a historical offense, especially when you count yardage, maybe not necessarily points. They did some really cool things on offense. There were still parts of the offense that needed help, though. It was not a perfect cohesive unit. Can we talk about the O-line? And my God, we still had another rotating spot in the O-line. Why, oh why did we have that? We complained about Beninock every damn week. We complained about Beninock for 17 weeks. And we only played 16 games. Like, oh my word. So, and then we had Deshaun Jackson, who he could never really get going with Jameis. And, the thing is, and a lot of people say, oh, he was working great with Fitzpatrick. No. He worked okay with Fitzpatrick for a couple of games and a couple of plays. But overall, he wasn't catching the ball, with anybody. But then we had Mike Evans breaking all kinds of records. And, Jameis looked good on the back half. And O.J. Howard was having what probably would have been a Pro Bowl season had he not gotten injured. And, it was a prolific vertical offense. Specifically, one of the things I did look up, our red zone efficiency. Our red zone efficiency was 24th in the league last year. We went up to 14th in the league this year. So, we did better. I don't know where we were as far as points scored last year versus points scored this year, but I think red zone efficiency should probably give us an idea for where that is. So, this was not a, oh my gosh, blow my mind kind of a season, especially not after what we thought we were getting out of the first couple of games, especially not what we thought might come out of after that Saints game and even with what we saw through training camp. So a B+. I thought it was a good offense. It was a really, really good offense. But it was not as awesome, I think, and I mean that in actual sense of the word, as maybe some people might have you believe, when they start talking about the stats. As far as the defense, I give them a D-. And for a lot of the same reasons that you have there, Ren, it's not quite an F, and I'll explain that. They had a supremely rough start to the year, and they underwhelmed all year long. So really rough start, underwhelmed all year long. They did do better down the stretch once Mike Smith was fired. I'll give them a few weeks for the transition period. But even still, the defense was never lights out. They had some highlights. They had some fun things that happened once Duffner took over. We mentioned, and I don't know that Duffner really had much to do with this, but we mentioned JPP, clearing that 10-sack thing. How could we forget Andrew Adams? Shout out to him, 3 interceptions in a single game. But my God, they couldn't get a turnover to save their lives for, an 8-week stretch? 7-week stretch, something like that. So all the injuries and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't really mitigate it for me a whole lot. It really doesn't. But I mean, my God, we lost Quan. Kendall Beckwith never came back. Vernon Hargraves went down the first part of the year. I think Carlton Davis was out for a few. Justin Evans went out. Chris Conti got stiff-armed into retirement. That should have been one of the top threes. Chris Conti. No. Anyway, but I mean, Vita Vea really looked like he was starting to come on there in the last bunch of weeks, and I don't know if it had anything to do with what Jason Licht said to him or he just started picking it up. But it's. I'm not going to say that they just completely fell on their face and failed the entire season, but it wasn't good. So a D- is where I give them. Special teams, I also give them a D- as well. It was just something that seemed to sputter all year long. I'm surprised to hear the stats that you brought out about them, Ren. But honestly, those aren't things that I really think about a whole lot with special teams. There was no flash on special teams. Special teams didn't seem to make.
They never helped.
That's what I mean. They never made the difference, like in a positive way for the team. And then certainly the whole thing with Catanzaro. I think General Cairo Santos was the bright spot. Brian Anger certainly seemed to sputter. And I mean, my God, we were like, he's the best kicker in the whole damn league, but didn't or best punter. This year.
He was 2 years ago.
Yeah, he was 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago. But I mean, Cairo Santos, and he wasn't even perfect, but honestly, when he missed one, it didn't give me a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach like some of these other guys did. So I give them a D-. Again, not a complete and total failure on special teams, but nothing good, nothing really to write home about. So I got a B+, a D-, and a D- across the three phases. I think the team overall, I'm giving them a D. It's just a D. I don't know that this was a complete and total utter failure of a season. I know that's easy to say that when you look at a 5-11 record for the second year in a row and for a head coach that is now fired. But I do think that there were some bright spots upon this team. But overall, it was a rather disappointing year. All right, Ren, well, that is going to wrap up our final thoughts on the 2018 season. That's our final thoughts. That's our grades. Whole kit and caboodle, now in the can. Hey, listen, we can't just contain a show on the entire season to just 2 parts. Absolutely not. So this show is going to be done for right now. But don't worry, Bucs fans. We're coming back tomorrow with the final part 3, of our final thoughts episode, and that's where we're going to be getting to your questions, your comments, and your emails, so be on the lookout for that. Guys, and until then, we'll close the show out. As always, go Bucs.